might not happen. So I think that's a positive thing as well.
There's a lot of different ways this is affecting the campus, so in good ways. Yes, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Gillespie. I am a senior in the College of Arts and Sciences. I was one of the authors of the referendum, so Dr. Woodley, thank you for reading it and citing it in your speech. I wanted to respond to a couple of your financial arguments. The first being, you mentioned that 0.36% that was cited in the Papiero LSC study. I would like to mention that it was 0.1% in U.S. That was the world statistic, but that was a tracking error. And the way you framed it was that, okay, well, it's 0.36%, and so we're going to lose $2.7 million. That's not what a tracking error is.
Yes, a tracking error is equivalent to a standard deviation.
Exactly. So it could very well be a gain of 2.7 million.
Perhaps. And the U.S., and we do have a globally diversified portfolio.
Sure, of course.
Is the appropriate number.
Of course. So over the past 2 years, I've done a pretty extensive literature review of the academic studies that analyze the effects of divestment on endowments returns. And what I've found is that the overwhelming majority of those studies conclude that either there is a net zero effect on endowments or slightly a net positive, and going into the future, those positive effects would be projected to continue given the self-projected decline of the fossil fuel industry. Now there are 6 studies that are run contrary to that, and they actually say that endowments would decrease their financial returns because of that. All 6 of those studies are funded by the IPAA, which is a oil and gas lobbying firm that spends millions of dollars per year on spending money so that the government will reduce restrictions on fossil fuels. 3 of those 6 studies were written by the same person. 2 of those were written by the same person. So 3 people wrote those 6 studies, and they cite each other's work in the studies. They write op-eds in the Wall Street Journal citing each other's work. And so there's this echo chamber which evolves, and ironically, they also cite a lot of university president statements that when they decide not to divest, they cite those as reasons for why divestment would hurt university returns. And so I guess my argument today is that if you actually look at the academic literature on this topic, which I encourage everyone in this room to do, as I have for the past 2 years, you'll find that the financial arguments for divestment are pretty overwhelming, and that those against are entirely funded by the fossil fuel industry. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Woodley, or anyone in this panel, if you have read a single study, peer-reviewed or not, which concludes that divestment would lead to a decrease in returns that was not funded by an oil and gas lobbying firm.
Oh, yeah.
Can I just ask another question related to that?
Yes.
Did you come across any studies that actually looked at the effect of divestment on the behavior and changing the behavior of the fossil fuel industry?
So the argument presented today against it changing behavior is that when these assets are sold, they are always bought by someone who doesn't care immediately, right? So there's no net effect, and that argument is pretty clear. I would argue that the real behavioral effect of divesting from fossil fuels is not the fact that we're actually physically selling shares, but it's a stigmatization of the fossil fuel industry. And essentially, you see this in divestment movements in history. The apartheid movement in South Africa, where a lot of universities divesting from tobacco. It's not that it necessarily financially cripples these companies, but it creates this social stigma and somewhat of a domino effect, where if Creighton divests, it makes it a lot easier for other schools to divest. And what that does is it sends a market signal. It says, look, we are not willing to invest in companies that we know if they conduct their business like business as usual will lead to the destruction of the global economy and humanity as we know it. And so overall, if you look at changing behavior, it's not so much selling the stock that matters, it's about creating the stigma. And I will agree that there are far more effective. So, I think a carbon tax would do much more than divestment. I think we should do these things all together. We should personally reduce our emissions. These are not mutually exclusive things that we need to do. We can do these all at the same time. I would argue that it's the most important challenge of our time, and that we should devote as much effort as possible to these problems. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive at all. But I would argue that purely...
Michael, we've got 5 more minutes and we've got 10 more people.
I would argue purely from a financial standpoint, you don't need to take morality into it at all. You don't need to take ethics into it at all. You don't even need to take that divestment changes behavior at all. I would say that purely from a financial standpoint, I would say that divestment would be good for this university, and I believe that the